Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
The moment my husband walked into the kitchen holding that mug, I felt something tighten in my chest, an instinct, a gut pull, something primal whispering that something wasn't right. He never made me coffee in the mornings. Hell, he barely remembered how I took it, even after 10 years of marriage. But there he was, grinning like a boy with a secret, holding out a steaming ceramic mug and saying in a tone that was just a little too syrupy, "A special cup for you, love." I stared at the mug for a second longer than I should have, my smile freezing on my face like an old photograph, and I forced myself to reach out and take it. The warmth of the ceramic seeped into my fingers, but something about the scent coming off the coffee made me pause. It didn't smell like our usual blend. There was something faintly metallic, almost bitter beneath the surface. Not strong, but subtle enough to tickle the back of my throat and make me want to pull away. "You made this?" I asked lightly, keeping my voice casual. He nodded, still smiling, but his eyes flicked to the mug too quickly, like he was checking to make sure I took it. "Yeah," he said. "Picked up some new beans. Thought you might like something different today." Now, here's the thing, my husband never gives a damn about coffee beans. To him, coffee is just hot liquid caffeine. He wouldn't know a Colombian roast from a can of gas station sludge. But now, suddenly, he's sourcing new beans? The words clanged around in my head like hollow metal. Still smiling, I sat down at the kitchen table, the mug in my hand, but I didn't take a sip. My sister-in-law, Claire, waltzed in at that exact moment, as if summoned by the scent of attention. Claire has always had a way of acting like she owned the room, even when it wasn't her house. Her perfume hit before she did, heavy, musky, the kind that lingered on furniture long after she left. She plopped herself down across from me, grabbing the nearest pastry without asking, and launched straight into her usual morning monologue about her latest dates, her new job, how she was too pretty to be stuck in this town. I barely heard a word. My attention stayed locked on that mug. I glanced down, then back at Claire, whose mouth was flapping like it always did, lips glossed, voice shrill. Something inside me stirred, nothing loud, just a quiet whisper that said, "Try it." So, I did something small, something stupid maybe, something almost childish. I waited until she looked away, then slid my mug across the table and casually picked up hers. She didn't even notice the switch. She took a sip from the mug meant for me about 5 minutes later. I watched her do it, slow and unknowing, like watching someone walk straight into a trap that was never meant for them. My hands went cold, even though my face stayed calm. She wrinkled her nose and said, "Ugh, tastes like shit. Did you brew this with your shoe?" But she drank more anyway, because Claire never wasted anything free, not even bad coffee. I tried to focus on the rest of the morning, tried to act like nothing was different, but the air around me felt thick, weighted. My husband sat beside me, eyes flicking toward Claire every few seconds, his fingers tapping against his mug like he couldn't quite decide whether to speak or run. I caught him staring at her 3 different times, but not in his usual eye roll, annoyed brother way. No, this was something else. This was anticipation. 25 minutes passed. Claire was still rambling, now onto some story about how her boss supposedly tried to hit on her, again, but something in her tone had shifted. She was slurring slightly, just a little, like her tongue had gone lazy. Then came the sweating. Little beads along her hairline, even though it was barely 70 in the house. At the 30-minute mark, it happened. Mid-sentence, mid-smirk, Claire stopped talking. Her eyes fluttered. She tried to shake it off, blinked hard, then stood like she was going to walk, but her knees buckled. Her wine glass hit the floor first, then her body followed, crumpling like a puppet with cut strings. I shot up from my seat. My husband froze. Claire wasn't moving. Not even a twitch. It's strange how a moment of chaos can slow down time, stretch it out into long, unbearable seconds where every movement, every glance, every twitch of a face feels magnified and distorted. As Claire's body hit the floor and that heavy thud echoed through the room, my instincts screamed to move, to rush over, to do something, anything, but my eyes were glued to my husband's face. And what I saw there wasn't fear or concern or even confusion. It was something colder, something more calculating. It was hesitation. Not the kind of hesitation that comes from shock or disbelief, no. This was different. It was like he was watching a scene play out exactly as expected, like he had already seen this moment in his head and was now deciding what kind of reaction he was supposed to deliver. His mouth parted slightly, his eyes flicked toward me for a fraction of a second, then quickly snapped back to Claire's crumpled body on the kitchen floor. Only then did he move, slowly at first, then more hurriedly, like he suddenly remembered that normal people are supposed to panic when someone collapses in front of them. I knelt beside Claire and called her name, shaking her shoulder gently, though I was still trying to process what the hell had just happened. She was breathing, shallow and uneven, her skin clammy and pale, her eyes rolling slightly under her eyelids. My husband rushed to call an ambulance, his voice high and urgent, but something still felt off. The urgency was there, yes, but so was the performance. Like he was hitting the right notes, but the melody wasn't quite real. As we waited for the paramedics, my mind drifted back to every damn family gathering where Claire made me feel like I was the help rather than her brother's wife. Every sarcastic comment disguised as a joke, every exaggerated eye roll whenever I spoke, every backhanded compliment she spat out in front of others to keep up appearances. Oh, isn't she just so sweet? A little plain, but sweet. Or, some people just aren't meant to be ambitious. Stability is a talent too, I guess. And my husband, God, he never defended me. Not once. Not even when Claire made that comment about my cooking tasting like nursing home food in front of his parents. He just chuckled awkwardly and changed the subject, like it was easier to keep the peace than to stand up for me. It was always easier for him. Easier to let her run her mouth, easier to pretend it was harmless, easier to pretend I was overreacting. For years I told myself it wasn't worth fighting over, that families were complicated and maybe I just needed thicker skin. But in that kitchen, as Claire lay limp and pale and my husband played concerned husband with just a little too much precision, all those years of biting my tongue suddenly tasted bitter. I remembered something else too, something that hadn't seemed important at the time but now stood out like a red warning light. Just a few days earlier, I'd walked into the hallway after putting away some laundry and heard hushed voices coming from the living room. I recognized his voice immediately, low and tight, and Claire's distinctive tone, sharp and whispery. I couldn't make out every word, but I caught a few. "It's the only way," she'd said. And he had replied, "She won't suspect anything." I remember standing there frozen behind the corner, heart pounding, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe they were talking about a surprise or some stupid family drama I wasn't involved in. I told myself to stop being paranoid. I told myself to forget it. But now, with Claire unconscious on the floor and my husband still glancing toward me like he wasn't sure how much I knew, that moment didn't feel so innocent anymore. It felt like a puzzle piece I hadn't known was missing until just now, clicking into place with a sickening snap. The paramedics finally arrived, rushing in with their equipment, asking questions I barely heard. My husband answered most of them, playing the part of the worried spouse, giving details about Claire's medical history that I didn't even know he knew. When they wheeled her out on the stretcher, he turned to me and tried to wrap his arm around my shoulder, but I stepped away before he could touch me. I told him I needed some air, but really, I just needed distance. Distance from his fake concern. Distance from his lies. As I stood on the porch, watching the flashing lights fade into the distance, I realized that whatever had been building under the surface in this family had finally started to rot through the floorboards. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was overreacting. I felt like I had been too damn quiet for too damn long. But what haunted me most wasn't what had happened to Claire, it was how my husband had watched it happen. And for a second, just a brief second, I could have sworn he looked relieved. They kept her overnight for observation, pumped her full of fluids, ran every test under the sun, poked and prodded, and scanned her head like it held the secret to a ticking bomb. But when the doctors finally came back with their answers, All they had were shrugs and uncertain theories wrapped in medical jargon that sounded more like excuses than explanations. No clear cause, one of them said, eyes skimming his clipboard like maybe the diagnosis was just hiding between the lines. Possibly an allergic reaction, possibly low blood pressure exacerbated by dehydration. Possibly. But never certainty. And certainty was what I needed, more than anything else. Claire came too late that night, groggy and weak, her skin still pale, lips cracked from dryness, voice raspy like she'd swallowed dust. She didn't remember collapsing, didn't remember anything past that last sip of coffee. And when the nurse asked what she'd eaten or drunk that morning, my husband quickly jumped in before she could even think. Just coffee and a croissant, he said, smoothly, calmly, like he'd rehearsed the line in his head already. She was complaining about a headache earlier too. Maybe that's connected? His voice was soft, measured, helpful, even. But it set something deep in my spine buzzing with unease. I didn't say anything at the hospital. I kept my face still, my mouth shut, my eyes blank. But inside my brain, a storm was starting to build. Because I couldn't stop thinking about that damn coffee. About the bitter smell, the weird aftertaste Claire complained about, the way he handed it to me like it was some kind of ceremony. A special cup for you, love. The phrase looped over and over in my head until it made my skin crawl. Something was wrong, and no amount of medical guesswork could scrub away the feeling that this wasn't some fluke. That mug wasn't just coffee. There was something in it, something meant for me. The next morning, while he was out making another suspiciously timed grocery run, I went straight to the kitchen and tore through the trash. I didn't even bother with gloves. I dug with my bare hands, tossing banana peels and greasy wrappers aside, pushing past yesterday's newspaper and soggy cardboard, until finally, I found something that didn't belong. A small silver coffee packet tucked beneath a crumpled paper towel, something I'd never seen before. It wasn't our usual brand, not even close. The label was foreign, unfamiliar, printed with words I couldn't understand. And tucked right next to it, like a rotten cherry on top of a rancid sundae, was something worse. A blister pack of pills, half empty, one side ripped open. I held it up to the light, heart pounding in my ears, reading the barely legible name of the medication printed along the plastic. I didn't recognize it. Not at first. But a quick online search peeled the skin off my sanity. Anti-anxiety medication, used in some cases to sedate patients before medical procedures. Not dangerous in small doses, they said. But enough of it, and someone might end up slurring, dizzy, unconscious. Especially if they didn't know they were taking it. Especially if they hadn't eaten. Especially if it was slipped into their coffee. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like someone you love was slowly trying to erase you? Not with punches or yelling, but with a smile and a hot drink. Have you ever watched someone hand you a gift and wondered if it was a trap dressed up in kindness? If you have, you know exactly what I mean. You know that feeling, that sharp, cold little knot in your stomach that whispers, "This isn't right." Drop a comment. I want to hear your story. Because maybe I'm not the only one who's ever smiled while quietly choking on suspicion. I sat there for almost an hour, holding that empty blister pack in one hand and the foreign coffee pouch in the other, trying to piece together a picture that was becoming harder and harder to ignore. My husband, my partner, my supposed protector, had given me something that didn't smell right, didn't taste right, and now I had proof it didn't come from some harmless little impulse to surprise me. The pills weren't mine. The coffee wasn't mine. The whole morning wasn't mine. It was a performance, a setup, a goddamn trap. And for what? To make me sick? To humiliate me? Or something worse? When he came home, whistling like nothing in the world was wrong, carrying a bag of groceries and a bouquet of cheap gas station flowers, I was already sitting at the table, both items laid out in front of me. He paused at the doorway when he saw them, just a flicker of something on his face. Was it guilt? Was it fear? Or was it irritation that I had found the evidence before he had a chance to bury it? I didn't speak right away. I just stared at him, waiting. When I finally did speak, my voice was calm. Too calm. What the hell was in that coffee, Adam? He didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He glanced down at the table, then back at me, and smiled like he always did when he was cornered. That slow, practiced smile that said, "You're being dramatic. You're imagining things." "Are you seriously accusing me of something?" he asked, smooth as silk, his tone just slightly amused, like the idea was laughable, absurd, something he could swat away like a mosquito. "Maybe you should calm down. You've been under a lot of stress lately." And just like that, he deflected. Just like that, he turned it back on me. There's a certain silence in a house that's too quiet to be comfortable, the kind that doesn't feel peaceful, but instead hums with the weight of what's left unsaid. And that morning, the quiet wrapped around me like a cold sheet. He was in the shower, steam hissing through the pipes, the water thudding against the tiled walls while I stood in the bedroom pretending to fold laundry, pretending to breathe normally, pretending everything wasn't unraveling at the seams. I wasn't planning to look at his phone, I swear I wasn't, but it was sitting right there on the nightstand, screen facing up, screen still unlocked from a call he'd just finished, the soft glow of it practically daring me to look. And then it buzzed. Just one short vibration. A message popped up, a name I never expected to see in that context, though it shouldn't have surprised me anymore. Claire. Not Claire S. Not sister-in-law. Just Claire. Just her name, sitting on his phone like it belonged there, like it had always belonged there. I didn't touch the screen at first. I just stared at the message that appeared in full preview, like some sick cosmic joke sent straight from whatever God had decided I'd suffered too quietly for too long. "You sure this will work without symptoms? What if she notices?" I don't know how long I stood there, stomach clenched, breath caught halfway up my throat, fingers numb from the realization sinking into my bones. It wasn't just him. It had never been just him. All this time, I'd been looking at Adam like he was the architect of my downfall, the cold manipulator pulling strings behind closed doors, but now the truth had spread its legs wider and uglier than I ever expected. They were in it together. Claire, smug Claire, venom-tongued, manipulative, spoiled Claire. The same woman who smirked when I walked into a room, who mocked me in front of family, who acted like my very existence offended her. She hadn't just disliked me, she had plotted against me. And he had let her. I opened the message thread, my hands trembling so hard I could barely scroll, heart pounding like a drum in my ears while the steam from the shower continued in the background, distant but suffocating. There were more texts, more than I wanted to see, and yet I couldn't look away. "Did you put it in yet?" one said. "She didn't drink much," another read. "She gave it to me instead." Claire had typed, almost spit it out, tasted weird as hell. And then his reply, casual, careless, as if they were discussing a damn grocery list. "It won't hurt her. Just messes with focus a bit. Makes her forget things. She'll think she's losing it." I felt the bile rise in my throat before I could stop it. I had to sit down because my knees didn't feel like they could hold me anymore. I gripped the edge of the bed, squeezing the blanket between my fists so hard my knuckles went white. They wanted to make me question myself, make me feel unbalanced, unstable, make me doubt my own mind so they could paint me as fragile, maybe even dangerous. So they could get rid of me. Quietly. Without blood. Without scandal. And then, like a shadow crawling out of the past, I remembered something I'd buried years ago, something I never let myself fully think about because I didn't want to believe it had meaning. It was during a holiday dinner, 3 years back, one of those long evenings where the wine flowed too easily and the conversations got just a little too loose. I had walked into the den to find Claire leaning too close to Adam, her hand on his arm, laughing at something that wasn't even funny. When I stepped in, she didn't flinch. She looked right at me, eyes gleaming, and said, "Don't be jealous, honey, I've known him longer than you." Later, I asked Adam what the hell that was about. He brushed it off, said she was drunk, said she kissed his cheek and stumbled, said I was overreacting. I wanted to believe him. God, I needed to believe him. But now I saw that moment for what it was. Not a drunken slip, not a harmless flirtation between siblings. It was an opening act. It was a crack in the facade that I hadn't wanted to look too closely at. Claire had always wanted him. Maybe not for love, Maybe not even for sex, but for control. She wanted to own him the way she tried to own every room she walked into, and he, weak, spineless, selfish, had let her. He'd become her co-conspirator, her accomplice in a game I didn't even know I was playing. I kept scrolling, needing to know how far this went, even though every word felt like a stab to the chest. And then, at the bottom of the thread, I saw the final message. It was short, simple, but it stopped my heart cold. Let's try again this weekend. This time, no switching. The next morning, I woke up before the sun had even climbed above the trees, before the world had time to stretch itself into motion, and the house was still soaked in that heavy silence that comes only after a storm you haven't told anyone about yet. I moved quietly through the kitchen, barefoot and calm, the cool tile beneath my feet grounding me in a way that nothing else could. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't afraid. I was focused. Everything inside me had gone cold and sharp, like steel pulled from ice, and for the first time in what felt like years, I felt like I was the one in control of the narrative instead of being dragged along behind it, half blind and bleeding. I made coffee slowly, deliberately, each step a little ritual wrapped in normalcy, grinding the beans, boiling the water, setting out the mugs. The same mugs we always used, his favorite one with the faded fishing quote and mine with the chip on the handle. But this time, there was something extra, something powdered and pale, hidden in the bottom of the creamer bottle, stirred gently until it disappeared like it was never there. The same pills he had tried to use on me, the same ones that had nearly dropped Claire to the floor, crushed fine between the mortar and pestle I'd found buried in the back of the drawer. I wasn't sure how much was too much, and honestly, I didn't care. I wasn't trying to kill him. I wasn't even trying to hurt him, not yet, at least. I just wanted him to taste what he'd been so eager to feed me. I made breakfast too, just like always, eggs, toast, sliced fruit arranged in a pattern that would have looked like care to anyone who didn't know better. I even hummed softly while I worked, an old tune my mother used to sing when she was angry but needed to seem composed, that strange habit women pass down through generations, smiling with clenched teeth while serving poison on porcelain plates. When he walked into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes and yawning like nothing in the world had changed, I handed him the mug before he could even sit down. "Your special cup," I said, and I smiled so wide it almost cracked my face open. He blinked, surprised by the gesture, but took the mug without hesitation, lifting it to his lips like a man who thought the war had already been won. But he didn't drink, not right away. He looked at me, really looked, and something in my face must have slipped because the yawn disappeared and was replaced by something else entirely: tension. A flicker of recognition. A thin crack in his calm. "You look different," he said, and there was a tremble behind the words he tried to mask with a half-laugh. "Everything okay?" I leaned against the counter and crossed my arms, still smiling, letting the silence hang long enough to make him shift in his seat. "I found your texts," I said, and his eyes widened just enough to tell me he didn't need clarification. He didn't ask which texts. He knew. And that's when it happened. He broke. Not with guilt, not with remorse, not even with shame. What spilled out of his mouth wasn't an apology. It was panic, pure and simple. A scramble to grab the pieces before the whole house of lies came crashing down on his head. "It wasn't like that," he said quickly, his words tripping over each other like they were trying to outrun the truth. "Claire," she pushed the idea. She said it was just something small, just something mild, nothing dangerous. She thought if we gave you a little something to dull your edge, you'd start forgetting things. Nothing serious. Just a way to make things easier to help you. "I don't know," calm down. He kept talking, digging deeper into the hole with every breath. "She said you've been on edge for months, and I thought, God, I don't know, I thought maybe it would help. Maybe if you seemed a little unstable, we could—" He stopped himself, realizing too late that he was already neck-deep in his own confession. "It wasn't about hurting you. It was never about hurting you." I nodded slowly, my heart beating steady and slow, like I'd rehearsed this exact moment 1,000 times in my head. "So it was her idea?" I asked, not because I didn't believe him, but because I wanted to hear him say it again, wanted to watch him twist under the weight of his own cowardice. "Yes," he said, "too fast, too eager. She manipulated me. You know how she is. You've always said she was dangerous." I walked back to the table, picked up his mug, and set it down firmly in front of him. The sound of ceramic hitting would echoed louder than it should have. I stared at him, letting my smile fade just enough to let the edge show. "Then drink it," I said softly, my voice flat and deliberate. "Prove to me it's harmless." He stared at the mug like it held a snake coiled beneath the surface, like he could see through the steam and into something darker, something festering that couldn't be boiled out or sweetened with sugar. His fingers hovered near the handle for a moment longer, and I didn't say a word. I just stood there, watching him, watching his hesitation grow into full-blown terror, disguised under a twitching smirk and a trembling jaw. Maybe he thought I'd blink first, that I'd laugh and say it was a joke, that I'd take the cup back and reveal the whole thing as some melodramatic stunt to scare him straight. But I didn't move, didn't offer him any comfort, didn't ease the edge off my voice or soften the look in my eyes. I just waited. Eventually, he lifted the mug to his lips and took a sip, just a small one at first, barely a taste, like he thought that would be enough to satisfy me. But I didn't flinch, didn't shift, didn't blink. So he drank again, deeper this time, eyes darting between mine like he was trying to read some hidden message in my stillness. The coffee was hot, strong, slightly bitter, exactly the way he always claimed to like it. And that's all it was, just coffee. No pills, no crushed powder, no sedative swirling beneath the surface. Just dark liquid and fear. That was the twist. The fear was the poison now. He sat back in his chair, trying to act casual, but I could see the sweat beginning to gather at his hairline already, could see the way his throat bobbed harder than necessary when he swallowed. He tried to keep talking, tried to change the subject, but his words were too fast, too slippery, spinning out from him like loose screws in a machine that had started rattling itself apart. I nodded along, didn't say much, just watched the slow unraveling of a man who'd thought he held all the strings, now tangled in the very net he wove. By evening, he was pacing the living room, fingers tapping against his thigh, breathing shallow, asking strange questions that didn't seem connected to anything. Did you see anything weird earlier?" he asked, voice too casual to be real. "Did the creamer taste off to you? I think maybe we got a bad batch." I smiled gently, shook my head, told him everything tasted fine. That was when the real breakdown began. It started small, just a slip in his voice, a stammer in a sentence, but then the words started to come faster, messier, disconnected from logic. "I never meant to do anything permanent," he muttered under his breath, not even looking at me anymore. "It was just to shake things up a bit, just to." God, she said it'd make things easier, make her leave on her own. I didn't ask who he meant. I didn't need to. He was talking to himself now, untangling threads of guilt and paranoia that had wrapped so tightly around him he couldn't tell where one ended and the next began. He started listing things I never asked about, names I didn't recognize, dates that meant nothing to me, affairs he'd hidden, money he'd siphoned from joint accounts, investments I never knew existed. Lies layered on top of lies, rotting from the inside out. "I didn't think you'd notice," he said at one point, his eyes wet, voice cracking like a child caught with a broken toy. "I thought you'd just start slipping, and I could say it was stress, maybe depression, and no one would question it." He collapsed into the armchair like a man suddenly drained of everything, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us was heavy, thick with things that couldn't be taken back, with all the quiet cruelty that had been passed off as love for far too long. I stood slowly, walked to the bedroom, and began packing a bag, not in a panic, not with rage, but with calm, deliberate movements that felt sacred somehow, like I was finally honoring the version of myself that I had buried under compromise and self-doubt. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to throw plates or beg for apologies that would have been as hollow as his promises. I just folded what I needed, zipped the suitcase, and left a single note on the kitchen table before I walked out the door for the last time. "You never poisoned me," the note read, Each word written in ink that didn't tremble, but you tried. And now you've poisoned yourself with your own guilt. I don't know if that made me a villain. I don't know if the cold way I handled it makes me cruel or calculating, or just finally clear-headed after years of pretending that love meant endurance. Maybe I should have stayed. Maybe I should have burned the whole house down. Maybe I should have slipped the real pills in and watched him collapse the way Claire did. But I didn't. I gave him a taste of his own fear, and he swallowed it whole. Did I go too far? Maybe. Maybe not. But you tell me, how many special cups does it take before a woman stops smiling and starts fighting back?